When people have extreme political beliefs and then they see evidence that opposes them, they temper those beliefs to become more moderate. No, whoops, that would be the smart thing to do, and politics makes us stupid. We actually dig our heels in and support those beliefs more against the evidence. It works this way for liberals and conservatives. But at the same time, political beliefs aren't something that people take lightly. You wouldn't expect someone to change their mind after just a single conversation. They've usually been thinking about these things for a while. So is there anything that can sway people's opinions even just a little bit? Yes, in fact. And here are 3. Number 1, forget about knowledge. Focus on curiosity. There's a problem with focusing on knowledge and facts, and it's not just that sometimes people ignore them. Sometimes the people you disagree with most have the same knowledge as you, but they use it to reach the opposite conclusion. One study showed liberals and conservatives some data about how effective a gun control measure was. It was fake data. In one case it showed the measure was effective, and in another case it wasn't. But that wasn't obviously apparent. You had to do some simple math to see that conclusion. When people are asked, not even for their own opinion, but just what conclusion the data supported, people with their prior politics do the thinking. Liberals thought it worked, and conservatives didn't. Not only that, but being better at math made them worse at getting to the correct answer if it went against their political beliefs. You can find a similar pattern with general science knowledge and belief in climate change. If you're strongly conservative, having more science knowledge is associated with believing in climate change less, and vice versa. Researchers argue that the smarter you are, the better you are at finding arguments that support what you already believe. But if you focus on curiosity instead of knowledge, ask questions about the pleasure of finding out new things or how often people read science books and the like, opinions converge. More curious conservatives and more curious liberals are more likely to agree that climate change is real than the less curious folks who share their politics. It's a small effect. It's not as if the science-curious conservatives are endorsing the reality of climate change as much as, well, any of the liberals on average, but it's enough to show that curiosity is associated with bucking the party line just a little bit, and more so than knowledge is. Number 2, use your words. Don't use their words. To learn about what arguments are most effective in changing people's minds, some researchers looked at over 12,000 posts in the subreddit called Change My View, where people make a case, invite counter-arguments, and say whose arguments convince them to change. What the researchers called the feature with the most predictive power of successful persuasion was to reply using words that were dissimilar to the original post. Use of similar wording seemed to suggest they were just raising arguments the original poster had already heard before, and instead it was better to raise points they didn't originally address. And quoting the original post directly was interpreted as nitpicking, and that was really unconvincing. They found some other trends as well, some things that might seem like intuitive advice. Staying calm instead of getting angry, bringing some evidence, and writing longer posts were all more likely to convince people. But it's worth noting the study was done in a context in which people were open to having their mind changed. And even then, the change happened in a minority of cases. Also noteworthy was that people who used the word I more than we in their original post were more susceptible to change. Use of we suggested they were more firmly entrenched, and having more than 4 back-and-forth exchanges was a good sign to give up. Number 3, forget about your morals. Think about their morals. Our political beliefs are often driven by our moral intuitions, and some recent research has shown that many of us on both sides of the political divide share some similar moral intuitions. Both liberals and conservatives endorse values relating to caring for others and avoiding harm when possible, and generally being fair. But elsewhere, our moral intuitions diverge. People on the conservative side of the spectrum tend to endorse values related to purity, respect for authority, and loyalty to in-groups, whereas liberals tend to be disinterested in those values or endorse the opposite, challenging authority or dissolving those group boundaries. This means when we try to change someone's opinion, we think of why we hold our own opinion, and these moral values immediately spring to mind. That's not that helpful. And some recent work suggests that you can nudge people's opinion just a little bit if you frame your argument according to their morality. For example, in one study, participants read arguments for universal health care. One focused on the moral principle of fairness. We should take care of everyone, people don't choose to get sick, etc. Another focused on principles of purity, the grotesque symptoms of disease and the need to control them to keep them from spreading. After reading the argument based on purity, conservatives showed a little more support for the Affordable Care Act than if they read the argument based on fairness. A similar effect was found in arguments for gay marriage. Conservatives were more swayed by an argument that gay couples were proud and loyal Americans, serving in the military and contributing to the economy, than they were by an argument argument based in fairness and equality. But the cat swings both ways. Similar studies showed that liberals could be convinced to increase their support for military funding by framing the argument in terms of the services provided to soldiers and the disadvantaged groups who are often recruited, or to support enforcing English as a national language based on it leveling the playing field for immigrants. None of these are huge effects. It's not like these arguments are suddenly convincing majorities of people to change their minds. But to make effective, practical change, sometimes nudging just a few people, just a little bit, is exactly what you need. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.